Welcome back to Math 152. This is lecture material for section 1.4. And what we're going to cover in this section is basically some types of bias in studies. What we've covered so far in this chapter is a lot of definitions, different types of sampling methods, types of data. And the reason we're doing this, and keep in mind that we would like to know something about the population. It could be the average age, the average height. If we give a certain type of medicine to everybody, what kind of response would we get? But it is very hard to be able to approach everybody in the population. So we have to do sampling. We have to pick out a sample, and that was randomized, stratified, cluster sampling, systematic. But even when we do that, there's going to be this thing called bias that comes into play. And bias is basically going to get us some wrong answers. So let's take a look at this and see if we can just be aware of what can go astray. So voluntary response bias. We sent out questionnaires, and we talked about this, where we may get more responses from people who tend to reflect feelings where they have strong opinions. These, we send them out. It may be by invitation. It may not be reflect the population as a whole. If I call around, people may not answer the telephone. So this voluntary response bias may come into play. Some people, it wouldn't represent the population as a whole, is what I'm trying to say. Self-interest bias is basically we're looking at a study and obtaining a favorable outcome for an individual product or study without considering the organization as a whole, not considering the outcome as a whole. So here in this slide, they're saying the motivation is to beat the competition, but it may be other things as well. There's just something inherent about this would be good for me if this occurred. And it may not be openly happening. Social acceptability bias. So the tendency of survey respondents to answer questions in a manner that would be viewed favorably by others. It may overreport good behavior, underreporting bad behavior, or undesirable behavior. Everybody wants to be viewed favorably by others. And social acceptability comes into play in this, and you may not be truthful as what you should be, or what you would hope the subjects to experience. Leading question bias. It could come about just by the way we ask as statisticians, ask the questions that we want to get the answers to. If you answer and this is, there's many ways that this can come out, but one of them is the order of choices. So you could ask, who do you prefer for president? Here's an example, Barack Obama or John McCain. And somebody may overly do the first or the last. They may hear the first name and tend to choose that one, or the last name and tend to choose that one. So just being aware of that, you could do things like, for every other person, I'm going to switch the order. So for the next person, I'm going to say, who do you prefer for president, John McCain or Barack Obama? And hopefully if there's any tendency for somebody to remember the last name or just focus on that first name, that could help alleviate that. So switch to the order of names each time the question is asked. A non-response bias, that's basically those where you have that non-responders, the people that we sent out and you're getting the response bias from. These are the people who didn't really respond to it. They were either too busy, they had no feeling one way or the other, but as part of the population, we would like to have that data, and we didn't get it because they didn't respond. So sometimes it's because we get too long on the surveys. Subjects may be too frustrated to complete the survey. They don't care about it, can't be forced to do so. They get in the middle of it, they just give up. So that's non-response bias. It's not recording those responses that we would have liked to have had. Okay. Finally, sampling bias occurs when we sample one segment of the population more than the others, and we would like to give a good, that's from going back to random samples, stratified samples, cluster samples, systematic. Remember that convenience sample? You know, that could come into play here. So the sampling bias occurs when some members of the population are more likely to be included in the sample than others. Samples of convenience almost always have a sampling bias. That sampling of convenience I would never suggest using. Samples of convenience almost always have sampling bias. If you go out in front of a movie theater that's playing an action adventure movie, and you are saying, which movie genre do you prefer? Naturally, you're going to get more of the action adventure movie responses from those. I mean, that's, you went there just because it was convenient, and you get overly done that one. So that was part of the sampling bias. Difficult to avoid sampling bias altogether. Just keep it in mind. So that's the end of our section 1.4. We're going to continue next with chapter 2 material. Chapter 2 is going to get more into the math part of it, bringing in data, counting, looking at it. So see you next time.